The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Emma Grayson dismounted her exhausted mare, the smell of smoke and gunpowder still clinging to her traveling clothes. Newton, Colorado Territory, 1874. Nothing but a dusty main street lined with weather-beaten buildings wasn't much, but it was far enough from her troubles in Denver. She'd ridden hard for 3 days, stopping only when necessary, her gaze constantly checking behind for pursuers. The wanted poster with her brother's face on it was folded in her saddlebag, along with the last letter he'd sent before his arrest. Innocent or guilty, she couldn't abandon him. The saloon beckoned with its promise of information and a moment's rest. Emma adjusted her father's pistol at her hip, hidden beneath her long coat, and tethered her horse outside the establishment. She pushed through the swinging doors, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior as conversations briefly halted at her entrance. "Water," she requested at the bar, placing a coin down firmly. "And information." The barkeep eyed her suspiciously but slid the glass toward her. "Information costs more than water, miss." "I'm looking for the sheriff," Emma said, keeping her voice low. "Need to speak with him about a legal matter." A deep voice from behind her responded before the barkeep could. "Sheriff's 3 days in his grave, ambushed by the Cottonwood Gang while escorting a prisoner." Emma turned to face the stranger. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a black Stetson pulled low, but she could see piercing blue eyes studying her from beneath the brim. His trail-worn clothing carried the dust of long rides, and a well-used Colt rested at his hip. Something about his steady gaze made her uneasy, like he could see right through her intentions. "That's unfortunate," she replied, maintaining her composure. "When will the new sheriff arrive?" "You're looking at the new sheriff," he said, touching the star partially concealed by his duster. "Deputy Sheriff Drake Jensen, acting sheriff until the territorial governor confirms the appointment." Emma's stomach tightened. The very law she was hoping to avoid stood directly before her. "I see. Congratulations on your promotion." "Didn't catch your name, miss," he said, his expression unreadable. "Emma," she offered reluctantly. "Just passing through." Sheriff Jensen's gaze lingered on her face a moment too long. "Most folks passing through don't come asking for the sheriff first thing." "Most folks haven't had their horse nearly stolen in broad daylight 3 towns back," she lied smoothly. "I thought to report it is all." The sheriff studied her for a long moment. "That'd be Sheriff Michael's jurisdiction in Cedar Ridge, but I'm happy to take your statement." "No need," Emma said quickly. "As you said, wrong jurisdiction." She turned back to her drink, hoping he would leave, but instead he settled onto the bar stool beside her. "Where you headed, Miss Emma?" "West," she answered vaguely. "Visiting family." "West is a big place," he observed. "And Newton's not exactly on the main trail to anywhere. Mind if I ask what brings you through our particular town?" Emma forced a smile. "Just where the trail led me, Sheriff. I'll be moving on by morning." Jensen signaled the barkeep for a whiskey. "Odd coincidence." "Got a telegram this morning about a woman matching your description. Sister of that bank robber they caught in Denver. Seems she disappeared right after visiting him in jail. They think she might be carrying stolen money from the robbery." Emma's heart pounded, but her expression remained neutral. "Is that so? Perhaps you should be on the lookout then." "Oh, I am." He sipped his whiskey, eyes never leaving her face. "Thing is, telegram described a woman traveling alone, dressed in men's riding clothes, chestnut hair, about 5'4", riding a sorrel mare with a white blaze." Emma's hand inched closer to her concealed weapon. "There must be dozens of women fitting that description." "Not in these parts," Jensen replied. "Not arriving on the same day as the telegram." The tension stretched between them until Emma stood abruptly. "Well, good luck finding your fugitive, Sheriff. I should see to my horse." As she turned to leave, Jensen's hand gently caught her wrist. "Miss Grayson, I presume." Emma froze, then slowly faced him again. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Your brother Thomas was caught with stolen banknotes," Jensen said quietly. "But witnesses say he was pushed into the bank vault by the real robbers, then locked inside when they escaped. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Emma's composure faltered. "How do you—" "I have friends in Denver," Jensen explained. "Good lawmen who believe your brother is innocent. They also believe someone's trying to frame him. The telegram wasn't about arresting you, it was warning me you might be in danger." Emma studied his face for any sign of deception. "Why should I trust you?" "You don't have to," Jensen said, releasing her wrist. "But I'm riding to Denver tomorrow to testify about what I know regarding the real Cottonwood Gang members, the same men who likely framed your brother. You're welcome to ride along." "I don't even know you," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. The cowboy-turned-sheriff's lips curved into a slight smile. "You don't have to yet." He drained his glass and stood. "But if you want to help your brother, I suggest we get acquainted. Meet me at the sheriff's office at dawn if you're interested." With that, he tipped his hat and walked out, leaving Emma with a decision that could change everything. Emma barely slept that night. The small room above the general store was clean but sparse, and her mind raced with possibilities. Sheriff Jensen could be setting a trap, or perhaps he genuinely wanted to help. By first light, she'd made her decision. The sheriff's office was a modest wooden building with barred windows and a small jail attached to the rear. Emma approached cautiously, her saddlebags packed and her mare ready for travel. Through the window, she could see Jensen at his desk, reviewing papers by lamplight. She pushed the door open, the bell overhead announcing her arrival. Jensen looked up, seeming unsurprised. "Miss Grayson," he acknowledged. "Decided to join me then?" "I'm still not convinced I should trust you," Emma stated plainly. "But for Thomas's sake, I'll take the risk." Jensen nodded and gathered his papers. "Fair enough. We've got a long ride ahead, 3 days if we push it." "Before we go," Emma said, "I need to understand why you're helping us. What's your stake in this?" Jensen's expression darkened. "The Cottonwood Gang killed my predecessor. They've terrorized 3 territories for over a year. Your brother might be the key to bringing them down." He paused. "And I believe in justice, Miss Grayson, not just the letter of the law. Call me Emma," she offered tentatively. "Drake," he returned with a nod. Within the hour they were riding east. Drake led on his tall black gelding while Emma followed on her mare. The morning sun warmed their backs as they left Newton behind, the rolling foothills of the Rockies framing their journey. "Tell me about your brother," Drake asked, after they'd ridden in silence for several miles. Emma considered how much to reveal. "Thomas is 25, 2 years younger than me. He's not the type to rob a bank. He was a schoolteacher in Denver until this happened." "And your parents?" "Dead," Emma replied tersely. "Influenza took them 3 winters ago. It's just Thomas and me now." Drake nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry to hear that. What about you, Sheriff? Any family?" "Former Army scout," Drake replied. "Served under General Crook. After the war, I drifted, took up bounty hunting for a while, then settled into law work. Found I preferred bringing men in alive to collect rewards for their deaths." He glanced at her. "No family to speak of. Not anymore." They rode through the day, stopping only to rest the horses and eat dried beef and hardtack from Drake's provisions. Emma was surprised by his consideration. He kept a respectful distance when they camped that night, giving her privacy while still ensuring her safety. Around the campfire, Drake unfolded a map. "The gang's been hitting banks and stage coaches throughout this region," he explained, tracing routes with his finger. "But they're strategic. They're not just thieves, they're planning something bigger." What makes you say that? Emma asked, huddling closer to see the map. Patterns too deliberate. They've hit the Colorado National Bank twice now, but left larger scores untouched. They took specific lockboxes from the last stagecoach robbery, ignored the cash shipment entirely. Emma frowned. You think they're after something specific? Documents, maybe. Or they're working for someone else. Drake rolled up the map. Your brother might have seen something that could identify them. If that's true, he's in even more danger, Emma realized with growing alarm. Which is why we need to reach him quickly, Drake agreed. Get some rest. We'll start before dawn. That night, as Emma lay wrapped in her blanket staring at the stars, she found herself studying Drake's silhouette against the dying firelight. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steadiness she hadn't felt since her father was alive. It was dangerous to trust so quickly, she reminded herself. Yet something about the sheriff made her want to believe in him. The second day of travel brought them through more populated areas. Drake suggested Emma wear a different hat and coat, items he'd packed specifically to help disguise her. Just in case anyone's looking for you, he explained. You came prepared, she observed. Almost as if you expected me. Drake's expression remained neutral. I hoped you'd come. Your brother's case has been troubling me for weeks. He paused. And I've been tracking the Cottonwood Gang since they killed Sheriff Harris. At midday, they stopped in a small settlement to water the horses. Drake disappeared briefly into the telegraph office while Emma waited with their mounts, nervously scanning the dusty street for any sign of trouble. When he returned, his expression was grim. There's been a development, he said quietly. Thomas's trial has been moved up. It's scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Emma's stomach dropped. That's too soon. Why would they rush it? Someone's putting pressure on the judge, Drake replied, helping her mount. We need to push harder. Might have to ride through the night. They left the settlement at a faster pace, the urgency of their mission growing with each passing mile. As dusk approached, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain. Storm's coming, Drake observed, glancing skyward. We'll need shelter. We can't stop, Emma protested. Not with Thomas's trial moved up. An hour in a downpour will slow us more than finding proper shelter, Drake countered. There's an old line shack about 2 miles ahead. We can wait out the worst of it there. They reached the abandoned herder's cabin just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. It was a single-room structure with a partially collapsed roof, but the corner with the stone fireplace was intact. Drake quickly unsaddled their horses and led them to the lean-to attached to the cabin side while Emma gathered what dry wood she could find. Inside, Drake built a fire that soon filled the small space with warmth and flickering light. Rain hammered the roof and lightning split the sky as they sat across from each other, their wet outer clothes hanging near the fire to dry. You're good at this, Emma observed as Drake prepared coffee in a battered pot he'd found in the cabin. Living on the trail, Drake shrugged. Spent most of my life outdoors. Army taught me the rest. How did you become a sheriff? Seems a solitary man might avoid being tied to one town. Something like sadness flickered across his face. Wasn't planning to stay in Newton. Was tracking the Cottonwood Gang when I stopped there. Sheriff Harris was an old friend from my Army days. He knew I was after the same men he was investigating. Drake stared into the fire. We were supposed to ride out together the next morning. But that night, he was ambushed while moving a prisoner. I found him dying in the street. Last thing he asked was for me to finish what he started. Emma watched emotions play across Drake's normally stoic features. I'm sorry about your friend. Harris was a good man, had a wife and young son. Drake's jaw tightened. The town council asked me to step in temporarily, seemed the right thing to do. They fell silent as the storm raged outside. Emma realized there was more to Drake Jensen than the stern lawman she'd first encountered. His sense of honor and loyalty ran deep, qualities her father had valued above all others. "What will you do after?" she asked softly. "After the gang is caught and my brother is free." Drake looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, the careful distance he maintained seemed to slip. "Haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "What about you? Where is home for you now?" "I've been teaching at a small school outside Denver," Emma replied. "It's not much, but it's honest work. Thomas and I had plans to save enough to buy land someday." "Good land in Colorado is getting scarcer," Drake commented. "But there's still opportunity for those willing to work hard." "That was our father's belief," Emma smiled sadly. "He brought us west when I was 12, convinced the frontier was where determined people could build something lasting." The storm's intensity increased, wind howling through the broken parts of the roof. A particularly loud crack of thunder made Emma jump slightly, and Drake noticed her discomfort. "Not fond of storms?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "When I was young, our homestead was hit by a tornado. I was trapped under debris for hours before they found me." She wrapped her arms around herself. "The sound still brings back memories." Without comment, Drake reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small harmonica. As the next thunderclap boomed overhead, he began to play a gentle melody that somehow rose above the storm's chaos. The simple tune worked its way through Emma's anxiety, providing an anchor against the memories threatening to surface. She watched his fingers move across the instrument, his eyes closed in concentration. It was an unexpected gesture of kindness that caught her off guard. When he finished, Emma found herself more relaxed despite the continuing storm. "That was beautiful," she said. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "My mother taught me," Drake answered, tucking the harmonica away. "She said music was the best medicine for troubled thoughts." A rare smile softened his features. Seems she was right. Something shifted between them in that moment, a tentative trust beginning to form. As the storm gradually subsided, they talked more freely, sharing stories of their lives before circumstances had thrown them together on this desperate journey. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind mud and debris but a freshly washed sky. They set out at first light, pushing their mounts harder than before, stopping only when absolutely necessary. The terrain grew more challenging as they approached the foothills, but Drake seemed to know every shortcut and trail that would speed their progress. Late on the third day, the outskirts of Denver came into view. Emma felt both relief and apprehension as they approached the city. Somewhere within those buildings, Thomas was awaiting a trial that could send him to prison for years or worse. "We'll need to be careful from here," Drake warned as they slowed their pace. "If the gang has influence in the city, they might be watching for you." "Where do we go first?" Emma asked, pulling the borrowed hat lower over her face. "I have a friend," Drake replied. Former Pinkerton detective turned attorney, Marcus Calloway. "If anyone can help your brother now, it's him." They entered Denver as twilight fell, keeping to less traveled streets. Drake led them to a modest boarding house on the city's western edge. After stabling their horses, he escorted Emma to a private entrance at the rear of the building. A tall, thin man with spectacles and graying temples opened the door before Drake could knock. "Jensen," he greeted quietly, ushering them inside. "Right on time. And this must be Miss Grayson." "Marcus," Drake nodded. "Any news?" "None good," Calloway replied, leading them to a small sitting room. "The trial starts at 9 tomorrow morning. Judge Wilkins is presiding. He's known for swift verdicts and harsh sentences." Emma sank into a chair, fatigue and worry overtaking her. "Can we see Thomas tonight?" Calloway shook his head. "I tried earlier. They've restricted access, claiming security concerns. He handed Drake a folded newspaper. This might explain why. Drake scanned the headline. Cottonwood Gang strikes again, 3 dead in territorial bank heist. When? Drake demanded. Yesterday, Calloway replied. Wells Fargo office in Golden. They left a witness this time, said one of the robbers mentioned Thomas Grayson by name, claiming he was their inside man. Emma stood abruptly. That's absurd. Thomas has been in jail for weeks. Of course it is, Calloway agreed. But it's convenient for whoever wants your brother to take the blame. They're creating a narrative that Thomas was the mastermind, coordinating from his cell. Drake's expression hardened. This was planned. They knew we were coming. How? Emma asked, alarmed. No one knew except the Telegraph, Drake realized. When I sent that message checking on the trial date, someone intercepted it. Calloway nodded gravely. The corruption runs deeper than we thought. I've been building a case for months, tracking financial discrepancies, mysterious pardons, witnesses who suddenly recant testimony. Who's behind it? Drake demanded. I can't prove it yet, Calloway said, but all signs point to Judge Wilkins and Railroad Commissioner Edward Blackburn. They've been acquiring land all along the proposed new rail corridor, often from people facing suspicious legal troubles. Drake and Emma exchanged glances. The lockboxes from the stagecoach robbery, Drake said. They could have contained land deeds or ownership records. Precisely my thinking, Calloway confirmed. The Cottonwood Gang may be working as enforcers, creating problems for landowners who won't sell, then stealing or destroying proof of ownership. Emma paced the small room. But what does Thomas have to do with any of this? Your brother taught the commissioner's son, Calloway explained. According to my sources, Thomas discovered discrepancies in public school funding that traced back to Blackburn. He was gathering evidence when the bank robbery occurred. So he was framed to silence him, Emma concluded, her voice tight with anger. And to serve as a convenient scapegoat for their other crimes, Drake added. We need to get him out. Breaking him out would only confirm his guilt in everyone's eyes, Calloway cautioned. We need to expose the real conspiracy. How? Emma demanded. The trial is tomorrow and they control the judge. Drake stood by the window, looking out at the darkening city. We need evidence, something concrete linking Blackburn and Wilkins to the gang. He turned to Calloway. Where would they keep their records? The real ones, not what they show the public. Blackburn maintains a private office above the Denver Mercantile Exchange, Calloway replied. I've had it watched. He meets there late at night, often with men matching descriptions of the Cottonwood Gang members. Then that's where I'm going, Drake decided. That's suicide, Emma protested. The building will be guarded. Drake's expression was determined. I've faced worse odds. Not alone, Emma insisted, standing to face him. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous, Drake argued. It's my brother's life at stake, Emma countered, and I can go places you can't. A woman causes less suspicion than a man prowling around at night. Drake studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. We'll need a plan, and a distraction. Calloway smiled thinly. As it happens, I may be able to help with both. 2 hours later, Emma found herself dressed in an elegant evening gown borrowed from Calloway's sister, her hair styled fashionably atop her head. Drake, meanwhile, had exchanged his trail clothes for a dark suit that transformed him from frontier lawman to respectable businessman. The change was remarkable without his usual attire. Few would connect him to the deputy sheriff from Newton. Remember, Calloway instructed as they prepared to leave, the charity auction on the main floor will provide cover for your entrance. Emma, your invitation identifies you as Mrs. Alina Winters, recently widowed and looking to invest your husband's mining fortune. "And I'm her financial advisor," Drake added, adjusting his cuffs. "Exactly. The commissioner knows most of Denver's elite, but with recent railway investors arriving daily, new faces won't raise immediate alarm." Calloway handed Drake a small lockpick set concealed in a cigar case. "Blackburn's office is on the third floor, east wing. The building plans show a private staircase accessible through the cloakroom." Emma tucked a small Derringer into her beaded handbag. Her father's pistol was too large to conceal in her current attire. "If we find evidence, what then?" "Bring it directly to Judge Hollister at this address," Calloway said, handing Drake a folded paper. "He's one of the few honest judges left in the territory. With sufficient evidence, he can issue an immediate stay of proceedings for Thomas's trial." Drake offered Emma his arm. "Ready, Mrs. Winters?" Emma took a steadying breath and slipped her gloved hand through his arm. "As I'll ever be, Mr. Jensen." The Denver Mercantile Exchange was ablaze with light. Carriages lined up outside as Denver's wealthiest citizens arrived for the charity auction. Emma and Drake ascended the steps, her heart pounding beneath the borrowed finery. "Remember," Drake murmured as they approached the entrance, "confidence is everything. You belong here as much as anyone." Emma straightened her shoulders and adopted the slightly bored expression she'd observed on wealthy women in Denver society. "I'm concerned these investment opportunities might not yield sufficient returns, Mr. Jensen," she said loudly enough for the doorman to hear. "My late husband would expect better than 8%. Drake played along smoothly. "I assure you, Mrs. Winters, the railway expansion presents unparalleled opportunities. Perhaps Commissioner Blackburn himself might address your concerns tonight." The doorman accepted their invitation without question, and they entered the grand hall where Denver's elite mingled among displays of auction items, everything from European artwork to mining equipment. A string quartet played in one corner while waiters circulated with champagne. "Blackburn," Drake whispered, subtly indicating a corpulent man in an expensive suit holding court near the auction stage. Beside him stood Judge Wilkins, instantly recognizable from his official portraits around the courthouse. "They look quite pleased with themselves," Emma observed, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Considering they're planning to condemn an innocent man tomorrow." "Patience," Drake cautioned. "We need to wait for the auction to begin when everyone's attention will be focused forward." They circulated through the crowd, maintaining their characters while Drake noted the positions of security men stationed throughout the room. As they approached a display of surveying equipment, Emma froze momentarily. "What is it?" Drake asked under his breath. "The man by the staircase," she whispered. "I recognize him from the wanted poster in Thomas's case file. He's one of the Cottonwood Gang." Drake casually turned to look. "McCall, Nathaniel McCall, wanted in 3 territories." His voice hardened. "And he's wearing a security badge." "They're not even trying to hide it," Emma said, indignation rising. "They've employed their own criminals as security." "Which confirms we're in the right place," Drake replied. "The auction's starting. This is our chance." As the auctioneer called for attention and the crowd moved toward the seating area, Drake and Emma slipped toward the cloakroom. A young attendant started to approach, but Emma deliberately knocked over a display of canes, creating momentary confusion that allowed Drake to locate the hidden door Calloway had described. The narrow staircase beyond was dimly lit and smelled of cigar smoke. They ascended quickly, Emma gathering her skirts to avoid tripping. At the top, a hallway stretched in both directions. "East wing," Drake whispered, leading her to the right. They moved silently past closed doors until reaching one with a brass plaque reading E. Blackburn, Commissioner. Drake tried the handle locked as expected. He removed the concealed lockpicks from his pocket and set to work while Emma kept watch. Within moments, the lock surrendered with a soft click, and they slipped inside, closing the door behind them. Blackburn's office was opulent mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, and a large map of the territory dominated one wall with the proposed railway route marked in red. "Check the desk," Drake instructed, moving toward a large cabinet. "Look for anything connecting him to the gang or Thomas." Emma rummaged through the desk drawers, finding mostly official correspondence until she reached a false bottom in the central drawer. "Drake," she called softly, "look at this." The hidden compartment contained a ledger and a stack of letters. The ledger detailed payments to various individuals, including substantial sums to NM and CG, likely Nathaniel McCall and the Cottonwood Gang. More damning were the letters, several from Judge Wilkins discussing removing obstacles along the railway route. "This proves they're working together," Emma whispered triumphantly. Drake joined her, examining the documents. "And here's the connection to Thomas," he said, pointing to a notation. "Grayson problem handled, evidence secured from school records." A noise in the hallway made them both freeze. Voices approached, one unmistakably Blackburn's booming tenor. "Hide," Drake hissed, gathering the evidence and pulling Emma toward a large armoire in the corner. They squeezed inside among hanging coats just as the office door opened. Through a small crack between the doors, Emma could see Blackburn enter with Judge Wilkins and Nathaniel McCall. Her body pressed against Drake's in the confined space, his arm protectively around her waist to keep her from moving. "The Grayson trial is proceeding tomorrow as planned," Wilkins was saying. "I've instructed the jury on the expected verdict." "Good," Blackburn replied, pouring drinks for the three of them. "Once he's convicted, we'll have our scapegoat for any past or future irregularities with our business arrangements." "What about his sister?" McCall asked, his voice hard-edged. "Still no sign of her. She's likely still hiding in some frontier town," Blackburn dismissed. "Without her brother's research, she's harmless. Besides, who would believe the sister of a convicted bank robber?" McCall looked unconvinced. "I don't like loose ends, and that lawyer Calloway is still asking too many questions." "Calloway will be dealt with after the trial," Wilkins assured him. "One problem at a time." Emma felt Drake tense beside her. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently whether to reassure her or himself. She wasn't sure. "What about the Jensen problem?" McCall asked. "My boys spotted him in Columbia 2 days ago, asking questions about us." Blackburn laughed. "Jensen is a small-town deputy with delusions of grandeur. If he becomes a genuine problem, we'll handle him the same way we handled Sheriff Harris." Emma felt Drake's breath catch, his body rigid with controlled fury. She tightened her grip on his hand, silently willing him to remain still. "The railway investors are getting impatient," Wilkins noted, changing the subject. "They want the right-of-way secured by month's end." "They'll have it," Blackburn promised. "The final holdouts will sell once the Grayson conviction demonstrates what happens to those who interfere with progress." The men continued discussing their plans, unaware of the witnesses hidden mere feet away. After what felt like an eternity, Blackburn announced they should return to the auction before their absence was noted. "The safe combination," McCall requested before leaving. "You promised the payroll details for next week's job." Blackburn sighed irritably but moved to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a small safe. He turned the dial, reciting aloud. "Right to 24, left to 16, right to 38. The safe opened, and Blackburn withdrew an envelope which he handed to McCall. "Don't make a mess this time. We need the money, not more bodies drawing attention." The men finally left, their voices fading down the hallway. Emma and Drake waited several heartbeats before emerging from their hiding place. "We have them," Emma whispered triumphantly. "Not yet," Drake replied, moving quickly to the safe. "We need the envelope he gave McCall that will directly link them to the upcoming robbery." Using the combination they'd overheard, Drake opened the safe. Inside, alongside bags of cash and document folders, was a duplicate of the envelope Blackburn had given McCall. Drake took it, along with several other incriminating documents. "This should be enough to convince Judge Hollister," he said, tucking everything into his jacket. "Let's get out of here before they return." They slipped out of the office and back down the hidden staircase. The auction was in full swing, providing cover for their re-emergence into the main hall. They were nearly to the exit when a commotion arose near the entrance. "Security alert," someone called out. "No one leaves." Drake pulled Emma behind a large column. "They must have discovered the break-in," he muttered. "We need another way out." Emma scanned the room, noticing a service door behind the refreshment table. "There," she pointed discreetly. They worked their way around the perimeter of the crowd, maintaining casual expressions despite the armed men now blocking the main doors. As they approached the service area, Emma deliberately stumbled against a waiter, causing him to drop his tray of glasses. The resulting crash and commotion provided the distraction they needed to slip through the service door unnoticed. They found themselves in a kitchen area bustling with staff preparing additional refreshments. Drake led Emma confidently through as if they belonged there, nodding to the surprised kitchen workers. "Commissioner's orders," he stated authoritatively. "Checking all exits." No one questioned them as they passed through the kitchen and out a rear door that opened onto an alley. Once outside, they broke into a run, Emma hitching up her elegant skirts to match Drake's pace. They didn't slow until they'd put several blocks between themselves and the mercantile exchange. In a darkened doorway, they paused to catch their breath. Emma found herself laughing softly despite the danger. "I can't believe we did that." Drake's eyes shone with admiration in the dim light. "You were remarkable in there." "We make a good team," Emma replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Something shifted in Drake's expression, the professional distance giving way to something more personal. "Emma," he began, his voice lower than usual. When this is over, shouts from the street interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Men with lanterns were spreading out from the mercantile exchange, searching adjacent streets. "We need to move," Drake said, the moment broken. "Calloway's contact is 6 blocks from here." They kept to the shadows, avoiding main streets as they made their way across town. Judge Hollister's residence was a modest home on a quiet street lined with elm trees. A single light burned in a ground-floor window despite the late hour. Hollister himself answered their knock, a thin, elderly man with a shock of white hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing. He ushered them inside without question when Drake mentioned Calloway's name. "I've been expecting something like this," the judge admitted, leading them to his study. "Calloway has kept me informed of his suspicions." Drake laid out the evidence they'd gathered. "This proves Blackburn and Wilkins are working with the Cottonwood Gang. They've orchestrated everything: the robberies, the land seizures, and Thomas Grayson's framing." Hollister examined the documents carefully, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is worse than I imagined. Half the territorial government appears compromised." He looked up at them. "You realize what you've uncovered will shake Denver to its foundations." "All we care about is stopping Thomas's trial," Emma said firmly. "He's innocent," the judge nodded. "I can issue a stay of proceedings based on this evidence, but Wilkins won't go down without a fight, and these men are clearly dangerous." "We'll testify to everything we've seen and heard," Drake assured him. "But first we need to ensure Thomas's safety." "I'll have my most trusted bailiffs move him to secure quarters tonight," Hollister promised. "And I'll dispatch federal marshals to arrest Blackburn and Wilkins immediately." He picked up the envelope detailing the upcoming robbery. "This plan to hit the territorial treasury next week gives us grounds for immediate action." Relief washed over Emma. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, justice for Thomas finally seemed within reach. She felt Drake's hand gently touch her shoulder in silent support. Judge Hollister moved to his desk and began drafting the official orders. "This will take some time," he advised them. "You should both get some rest. There's a guest room upstairs you can use, Miss Grayson. Mr. Jensen can take the study sofa." Emma hesitated, reluctant to be separated from Drake after all they'd been through together. Sensing her unease, Drake spoke up. "If it's all the same to you, Judge, I'll stand watch downstairs. These men have resources and I'd prefer to be vigilant." Hollister nodded in understanding. "As you wish. I'll have my housekeeper prepare some food. You must both be exhausted." Later, after a simple but filling meal, Emma found herself alone with Drake in the judge's study, while Hollister worked in his home office to coordinate with federal authorities. The borrowed evening gown had been exchanged for a simple dress provided by the housekeeper, and Drake had removed his jacket and tie, looking more like himself again. "You think it will work?" Emma asked softly. "Will Thomas really be free tomorrow?" Drake leaned against the mantelpiece, his face contemplative in the firelight. "Hollister is one of the most respected judges in the territory. With evidence this compelling, even Wilkins can't fight it." Emma nodded, trying to believe it. After coming so far and risking so much, the possibility of success seemed almost unreal. "What will you do afterward?" she asked. "Return to Newton." Drake studied her for a long moment before answering. "I took the sheriff's job to find justice for Harris." "Once the Cottonwood Gang is brought down." He hesitated. "I'm not sure Newton is where I belong anymore." "Where do you belong then?" Emma asked, her heart beating faster for reasons she wasn't ready to examine. Drake moved closer, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. 3 days ago, I would have said nowhere. But now." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Now I'm not so certain." Emma found herself leaning slightly into his touch. The connection that had been building between them through danger and shared purpose suddenly felt like something more, something with possibilities beyond their current mission. "Drake," she began, but was interrupted by Judge Hollister's return. "It's done," the judge announced, oblivious to the moment he'd broken. "Federal marshals are moving into position. By dawn, Blackburn, Wilkins, and the known members of the Cottonwood Gang will be in custody, and Thomas Grayson is being transferred to protective custody as we speak." Emma's eyes filled with grateful tears. "Thank you, Your Honor. We can never repay you." "Justice requires no payment, my dear," Hollister replied kindly. "Now I suggest we all get some rest. Tomorrow will be eventful." Sleep, however, proved elusive for Emma. Despite her exhaustion, her mind kept replaying the events of the past days and the unfinished conversation with Drake. Around midnight, she gave up trying to sleep and descended the stairs, drawn to the soft light still glowing from the study. Drake sat by the window, his vigilant gaze on the street outside. He turned when she entered, a question in his eyes. "Couldn't sleep," Emma explained, wrapping her borrowed robe more tightly around herself. "Too much on my mind." "Come sit," he invited, gesturing to the chair opposite his. "I've been thinking too." Emma settled into the chair, drawing her knees up beneath her robe. "About the case, partly," Drake admitted, "but also about what comes after." He met her gaze directly. About you, Emma." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Me." "When we met, you said you didn't know me," Drake reminded her. "And I said you didn't have to yet, but now you do know me better than most anyone ever has." Emma nodded slowly. "Yes, I believe I do. And I've come to know you," Drake continued. "Your courage, your loyalty to your brother, your quick thinking." He leaned forward slightly. "I admire you, Emma Grayson, more than admire you if I'm being honest." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "When you first stopped me in that saloon, I thought you were my enemy," she admitted. "I never imagined that we'd end up here." Drake smiled slightly. "Life has a way of surprising us." Emma returned his smile, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. "Yes, it certainly does." They talked through the night, sharing stories and hopes for the future that had seemed impossible just days earlier. As dawn broke, they heard movement in the house as Judge Hollister and his staff prepared for the day ahead. "It's time," Drake said, standing and offering Emma his hand. "Ready to see your brother freed?" Emma took his hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. "More than ready." The Denver courthouse was unusually crowded that morning as news had spread of dramatic overnight arrests. Emma and Drake sat with Calloway in the front row of the courtroom where Thomas's trial had been scheduled. Judge Hollister presided instead of Wilkins, his stern countenance surveying the packed gallery. When Thomas was brought in, Emma barely restrained herself from rushing to him. He looked thin and tired but broke into a smile when he saw her. She mouthed "It's over" to him and watched hope dawn on his face for the first time in weeks. Judge Hollister's declaration was swift and decisive. "Based on evidence presented to this court, all charges against Thomas Grayson are dismissed. Mr. Grayson, you are free to go with the court's apologies for your unjust detention." The gallery erupted in murmurs as Thomas was formally released. Emma finally embraced her brother, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "How did you do it?" Thomas asked in wonderment. "I had help," Emma replied, turning to introduce Drake, who stood respectfully nearby. "Deputy Sheriff Drake Jensen," Drake said, extending his hand to Thomas. "Your sister is quite remarkable. You're fortunate to have her fighting for you." Thomas shook Drake's hand warmly. "I've always known that. Thank you for helping her." Calloway joined them, adding, "The real work begins now. The corruption Blackburn and Wilkins fostered runs deep. There will be more arrests, more trials." "Will you need our testimony?" Emma asked. "Eventually," Calloway confirmed. "But not immediately. You've all been through enough for now." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered to document the scandal that was rocking Denver. Emma, Drake, and Thomas slipped out a side entrance to avoid the commotion, making their way to Calloway's boarding house where they could rest and plan their next steps. Thomas, once settled in a comfortable chair with a hot meal before him, listened in amazement as Emma and Drake recounted their journey and discoveries. "I can never thank you both enough," he said when they finished. "You risked everything." "You'd have done the same for me," Emma replied simply. As evening fell, Thomas retired early, exhaustion from his ordeal finally catching up with him. Emma and Drake found themselves alone on the small porch behind the boarding house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. "What will you do now?" Drake asked softly. "Return to your teaching position," Emma considered the question. "Eventually, perhaps, but first I think Thomas and I both need time away from Denver. Too many difficult memories." Drake nodded in understanding. "I should return to Newton, at least temporarily. The town council deserves a proper resignation if I'm not staying on as sheriff." "You've decided, then, not to stay in Newton?" Drake turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about something you said about your father's dream of building something lasting on the frontier." Emma's heart quickened. Yes, there's good land still available near the Colorado-Wyoming border, Drake continued. Fertile valleys that would support crops and cattle. A man with some savings and a willingness to work hard could establish something worthwhile there. It sounds lovely, Emma said, understanding beginning to dawn. Drake took a step closer. It would be lovelier with the right partner, someone courageous and determined, someone who knows the value of building something that lasts. His voice softened. Someone like you, Emma. Emma caught her breath, studying his face in the fading light. The usually guarded sheriff was completely open to her now, vulnerability and hope clear in his eyes. "Are you asking me to come with you?" she whispered. "I'm asking for a chance," Drake replied. "A chance to court you properly, to see if what I feel for you, what I believe you might feel for me, could grow into something lasting. Something like your parents had." Emma's heart felt too full for words. Instead, she reached up and gently placed her palm against his cheek. Drake covered her hand with his own, turning slightly to press a kiss to her palm. "Is that a yes?" he asked, a rare smile transforming his features. "It's a yes," Emma confirmed, smiling through tears of happiness. "Though Thomas might have something to say about his sister running off with a lawman," Drake chuckled. "Your brother seems like a reasonable man, and he's welcome to join us, at least until he finds his own path." As the last light faded from the sky, Drake drew Emma gently into his arms. Their first kiss was tender and questioning, the second more confident as they explored this new dimension of their relationship. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you," Emma murmured when they finally parted. "For believing me, for helping Thomas, for everything." Drake brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "You never needed to thank me, Emma. Finding you was reward enough." 1 year later, the small homestead nestled in the valley looked nothing like it had when they'd first arrived. Where there had once been only open prairie, a sturdy log cabin now stood, surrounded by fenced pastures where cattle and horses grazed. A creek wound through the property, providing water for the kitchen garden Emma had planted with herbs and vegetables. Emma stood on the porch, watching dust rise from the trail that led to town. Thomas was returning from his weekly trip to deliver mail and purchase supplies. His own cabin stood a quarter-mile away, where he'd claimed land adjacent to theirs. After helping them establish their homestead, he decided to stay, finding peace in the rhythms of frontier life and purpose in the small school he'd started for neighboring families. Drake emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Thomas is early," he observed, coming to stand beside Emma. "Must have good news," Emma agreed, leaning into her husband's embrace. They'd married in a simple ceremony 6 months earlier, with Judge Hollister making the journey from Denver to officiate. Calloway had attended as well, bringing news of the ongoing prosecutions resulting from the Blackburn-Wilkins conspiracy. Justice had been swift and thorough, with most of the Cottonwood Gang now serving long sentences. Thomas reached the cabin and dismounted, his expression animated as he approached the porch. "The railroad's coming through," he announced without preamble. "But the good kind this time, legitimate investors with fair offers for right-of-way access along the northern ridge." "That's wonderful news," Emma replied. "It will make getting supplies much easier." "And getting our cattle to market," Drake added. Their small herd was growing, and with rail access their prospects would improve significantly. "There's more," Thomas continued, pulling a letter from his pocket. "This came for you, Drake, from Newton." Drake took the envelope, recognizing the handwriting of Newton's town clerk. Inside was a brief note, and a newspaper clipping announcing the completion of Newton's new courthouse and jail, with a mention of the town's first sheriff, Harris, and his successor, Jensen, whose work had brought down the notorious Cottonwood Gang. They've named the main street after Harris, Drake noted quietly. He would have hated the fuss, but his widow will appreciate it. Emma squeezed his hand, understanding what this closure meant to him. He would be proud of what you accomplished. Thomas cleared his throat. I've invited the Lowells for dinner Sunday after church. Their daughter Mary is visiting from Denver. Emma exchanged a knowing look with Drake. Thomas had mentioned Mary Lowell several times in recent weeks with increasing interest. We'd be happy to have them, she assured her brother. There's plenty of venison from Drake's last hunt. As Thomas headed to his own cabin, Drake pulled Emma close. Your brother may be finding his own lasting connection, he observed. About time, Emma replied with a smile. He deserves happiness. Drake's expression grew thoughtful as he gazed at the home they'd built together. Do you ever miss teaching? Or Denver? Emma shook her head. I'm still teaching, just fewer students for now. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her abdomen, where the first signs of their expected child had begun to show. And this is home now. With you. Drake's eyes softened as he placed his hand over hers. Do you remember what I said when we first met, when you told me you didn't know me? You said I didn't have to yet, Emma recalled, smiling at the memory. You were right. I didn't know then how completely you would change my life. For the better, I hope, Drake murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. For the better, Emma confirmed, turning to face her husband fully. Though I would never have imagined that day in Newton, that a stern sheriff with suspicious questions would become the love of my life. Drake laughed, a free and easy sound that had become more common in the months since they'd made their home in this peaceful valley. And I never imagined the determined woman ready to draw a gun on me would become my wife and the mother of my child. As the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, they stood together on the porch of the home they'd built, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the frontier itself. From unlikely beginnings in a dusty saloon, had grown a love strong enough to overcome danger and distance, a love that would, indeed, last.